last time we talked about some of the facts that will affect our non-indentation behavior, and we have 9 facts. We will talk about each one today. Okay. The first one is the summer drift. The summer drift, the cause of the summer drift, they have 2 causes. The first one we call the creeper. Creeper is 蠕变, 蠕动. It means that the material is moving in a very slow speed. Okay, very slow velocity. Okay, this we call the creeper. This creeper is created by the material with the we call the plastic deformation. When a subject, a body, is subject to the high pressure force or high stress force, in that case, inside of the material, they have some of the area with the plastic flow. We call the 塑性流. Okay. If the inside of the material we have the plastic flow, then the material body will have a slow motion. It means that we move a unit distance with a long time. Okay. In this case, we call the creeper. Creeper is the drifter. Drifter we call the, in general drifter we call it the 漂移. Okay. So this drifter is very small motion due to the plastic flow inside of the body. Okay, we call it dripping. Okay. The second is caused by the thermal drifter. As the terminology show, thermal is mean that is affected by the temperature. If body is operating at a high temperature, in that case, they have the thermal expansion or contraction. All right. In general, we have the thermal expansion when temperature is increased. If we decrease the temperature, then we have a contraction. 一个伸张，一个收缩。Okay. So the expansion or contraction of the body is also very small deformation. This small deformation we call the thermal drifter. Thermal drifter. Okay. So in this case, we have the thermal drifter behavior. Okay. With the two sources. One is the creeping, another is the thermal drift. Okay. So in general, when we operating the non-indentation test, we always have these 2 kind of the factor will affect our indentation behavior. Okay. So in that case, how to correct the thermal drift? 你怎么去矫正它 ？Okay. The thermal drift try to reduce the thermal drift. We always like this way. Okay. We call it the devariant process. We use the devariant process to avoid the thermal drift. Maybe this thermal drift cannot be eliminated to be completely. It is impossible to have the thermal drift to be totally avoided. Impossible. But we can reduce the thermal drift effectively. Okay. So in that case, the non-indentation we try to use we call the devariant process. First mean by devariant process. In the indentation process, the ordinate is a load we apply. The abscess is the indentation depth we have. Okay. So input the load, and then we have the H, mean the indentation depth as the output. Our output, right? So we have the curve like this one. Okay. Here is the P maximum, right? Okay. This in general, we have this kind of the operating condition. Give it a loading, unloading. But what does it mean by derailing? Derailing is look like this one. P, H. We have the loading process, and then up to the P maxima, mean the maximum load is set. We give this maximum load holding for a period of time. It means that we have a period of time. This period of time is dependent on the material itself. Okay, if it is a soft material, this we holding this P maxima to be a constant value for a period of time. Okay, then give it the unloading process. This is loading. This is unloading. Before starting the unloading process, we give the process to be a constant P maxima for a period of time. This process we call the derailing process. Okay. So in this case, this period of time may be long or may be short. Okay. If your material is very soft, 很软的材料, in this case, the time of the derailing process should be long. 应该把它放得更大一点。如果你是软的材料 ，if your material is very hard, the brittle material, in this case, the process should be small in the period of time. Okay, so this is we give the derailing process, then we have finished the unloading process. In this case, we do not correct the thermal drift. It means that the thermal drift effect can be reduced. Okay, so that is we try to use the derailing process, put it in the process of the loading unloading process. Between the loading and the unloading process, allow the thermal drift can be reduced. All right? This we call how to improve our behavior due to the thermal drift. Okay, just put the derailing process. So in the later section, if we have show the derailing process means that when you are loaded up to the maximum load, then we give this maximum load to be a constant value for a period of time. This time may be dependent on your material. If your material is a soft material, then you give it the time of the period, the period of time to be long. If your material is brittle material, in this case, you can shorten your derailing process time. Okay. So this is the first one. The second, we have the second factor. We call the initial penetration depth. Penetration, what's mean by penetration? 压痕的深度。Okay, penetration depth, we call the 压痕深度。Okay, so what's mean by initial penetration depth? Here show the ordinary load and then the indentation depth. And the profile look like this one. This is loading, unloading. Okay, all right. But you will find here, after the beginning point, after the initial point of the loading process, meaning here, you can magnify, look like this one. 把它放大以后，会看得到这样的一个情况。Okay. So in this area, we magnify the profile. We find that this circle dot is just experiment data. This solid curve is just the regression of this experiment data. Okay? 我们的点是一个实验的资料， 但是实线的部分是给它回归的。OK， so we find here is the just beneath the vertical axis. Here we find this solid curve intersect with this ordinate with the other this point. This point is not the original point. Okay, we find that this point they have a load we call the PI. This load we have applied this load, but we find at this point you will find the indentation depth is still 0，就是说我已经施了力量，但是我的这个深度仍然是0。Okay, so here is just a regression of your experimental data, but you will find your PI, just your load you apply, is non-zero, but your indentation depth at this point is still 0. So in this case, we try to have this curve to be extrapolation, 就是把它外插 extrapolation to the 0. Okay, allow this curve extended outside to intersect with the axis. Okay, so in this case, in this region, we don't have experimental data. With this extrapolation, it's just we extended this solid curve outward. All right. So this outward extrapolation will intersect with the axis. Then we obtain this value. This value we call the initial penetration depth. So this means that if your load is not enough, you will find that you don't have the indentation depth. Any solid body, when you apply the load, it's not sufficient height. It means insufficient height. In this case, we don't have any indentation depth. All right. This is the body behavior, solid body behavior. OK， 所以我们就是说，一个固体，如果你的力量不够大的话，它不会变形，So in this case, we have the HI. This HI is virtual one, it's not a real one. Okay, just we have extended this solid curve outward to intersect with the other system. So in this case, this we call the HI. It's initial penetration depth. Okay, so this is the second factor. We have the P and the H. All right. So that is the second factor. The third factor is affected by the instrument compliance. Compliance is mean the this compliance is just a stiff one of this is a structure. I remember last time. You have this frame, all right? This frame, because they have the weight applied to the hand of hand on this structure, all right? So in this case, the structure in here cannot keep this body in a horizontal way. It means that maybe this structure, the cantilever can be deflected, maybe deflected. with a very small value. This small deflection, okay, will allow your indentation behavior to create a large influence on your indentation behavior. So in this case, this frame, our it is stiffness. In general, we have our fracture, we have our structure with the high stiffness. If the body or the frame to 架构 with the high stiffness, then the compliance of this body is very, very small. So compliance is just the inverse of the stiffness. With the high stiffness means that the body with a small compliance. All right. So this is we talk about the fracture or the frame of the structure. Okay. All right. So in this case, in our instrument compliance, it means that we talk about the stiffness of the structure. The compliance inverse of the structure stiffness. Now, we have the body in general. Okay. Now we show the two cases of the instrument compliance. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Here they have two cases. The white one show the instrument without any deformation. It means the structure is at high stiffness. 这个结构没有任何变形。And then the red one show the frame have the deflection, So the deflection from this white one to the yellow one, the movement or this structure, the movement may be from the low one to the up one, or from the up one move downward to the low one. Okay, to the low one. So the structure, they have two kinds of structure. Okay, this is because you have the load applied to the level of your friend. In this case, your friend level will have the deflection. This deflection may be from the maybe move upward or move downward. Okay. In general, if it is moved upward, this value is the negative value. If it is moved downward from the white one, move to the yellow one, red one. In this case, we have the values move downward. In this case, this C value is just the positive value. Okay, it's positive value. Okay, so in this case, we have a C. C is mean the compliance. Of the frame. Okay. This frame maybe have the positive compliance or maybe the negative compliance. If this white one is just without any compliance, it means the without any deformation. Okay, but after apply your load, you'll find that your friend have a small deformation, move upward or downward. Move upward is negative value. If we move downward, we have the positive value. Okay, so this C value we call the compliance of the frame. It's maybe either the positive value or negative value. Then last time we talked about the dP, dH. This is load vary with your indentation depth. We call the stiffness. Then the inverse of this value, we call the dH/dP, just the compliance. All right. So in this case, when we have the test for the indentation test, then we obtain the P and the H curve. From the P and the H curve, we obtain the dH/dP. So dH/dP is obtained from your experiment data. Okay, so dH/dP is a variable. Then this dP/dH actually include two terms, 包括两个项. The first term is look like this one. The second is the CF. First the CF. CF is just the compliance of your instrument. Okay, just we have to write in C here. Okay. So this may be CF. We give the sum square. We call the C of F. Okay. So dP, dH/dP is a compliance, is a total compliance from your experiment data. But this term can be decomposed into two terms. 你可以分解到两个项. This term is come from your indentation. Because here HC is the real indentation depth, ER is your reduced module. Okay, so this comes from material itself. Because you have to carry out the indentation test. So this term is the compliance related to your material itself. The second term is related to your structure. We call the C of F. So if we want to obtain the compliance of your material, you have to obtain this term only. First, how to obtain it? dH/dP is obtained from your curve, right? Obtained from your measurement. The C of F is a variable. If it is a variable, when you use this machine, the C of F is always to be affordable. The manufacturer will provide you the CF value. So this value minus CF value is just this value. This value is related to your material, your material itself, not related to your flat. So there's a dVdx is just included two terms, but this value minus this C of F, just this value is just the material comprise, material comprise 就是材料本身的这个劳性。So this is your instrument comprise maybe more or less influence your comprise of your material, but you want to obtain the comprise of your material. In this case, you have your DHDP minus your frame comprise. This is the third term. The fourth term, we call the indented geometry. What's indented geometry? This is a very important factor in our indentation test in general. Okay. Here, in general, we want to use indentation test to measure the hardness or Young's module of the same thing, not the substrate. Okay. Because the substrate, in general, it is easy to obtain from your handbook or any resource. Okay. But you want to measure the same thing, material or property. Here is a substrate. Here is the same thing. With the thickness, we call the T of F. This TF is always to be a very small value compared with the substrate. Alright? So in this case, we have the normal indentation depth applied to the same fin. We want to measure the same fin property. Okay. Now, we find that the indentation depth has become very important factor. This H or HI value, we try to have the HI value and then we determine the real contact depth. If we have real contact depth is available, then we can obtain the H and then reduce margin. Okay? So the HI value, when we have this HI value, we try to obtain the real contact depth. Real HC, obtain the real contact depth. Then we have a real contact depth, we obtain the real contact area. If we have a real contact area, then we obtain the H and the ER, reduced module. Okay. So now we'll talk about this one. Because we generally use the Buckovich indenter. The Buckovich indenter, with its shape, with its tip at this area, with its shape to be a conical form. Okay. So this is the ideal indenter we prepare. If we can prepare ideal indenter, but actually in reality it is impossible to obtain the ideal indenter. But with our theoretical model is developed based on the ideal indenter. If it is ideal indenter, then we'll find that the tip of the indenter at this point, at this tip point, is just really sharp, with an angle. Okay? But in actually, we have the indenter. It's not prepared like the ideal indenter, because our indenter is prepared by the artificial manner. Okay, just it is prepared by the 手工的 in the artificial manner. Okay, in this case, the profile of the tip other the actual indentation is look like this one. It's very arbitrary, and then it's very hard to prepare to have the actual indentation to be the same form, same shape, same profile. Okay, because it prepared artificially. Okay, so in this case, we have the substrate here, we have the sinking here, all right? Then we have the different indentation depths from 10 nanometer to increase to the 100 nanometer. Okay, now we want to see the real contact depth. We call it AC. Real contact depth. Okay, the real contact depth, if we have our indentation depth is 10 nanometer, then the real contact depth we call the AC is shown in the bottom. Okay, if it's created by the ideal indenter, it means that you can prepare your Bukovic indenter to be the ideal form. In this case, your contact area is this form. It's just a regular triangle. Okay. But created by your actual indenter, maybe this one. Okay. So if your indentation depth is created at the 10 nanometer case, you'll find that your ideal indenter created the real contact area is this form, and then the area created by the actual indenter is this form. You'll find that these two areas have a big difference. If it is at the 10 nanometer depth, you'll find that this area ratio to the mean GP is 10 to 1. Okay, it means that the actual indenter, the area created by the actual indenter is much larger than the real, the ideal indenter. Okay, so this is if your indentation depth is at a small value. In this case, your indentation contact area created by the actual indenter is much larger than your ideal indenter case. Okay, now we give the 50 nanometer depth, give your indentation depth to be increased. In this case, the ratio of the real contact area created by these two indenters are reduced to 4 to 1. Okay, so the ratio is decreased if your indentation depth increase. Okay, when your indentation depth increase to 100, you'll find that this ratio is further reduced to 1.2 to 1. Okay, 1.2 to 1. So you'll find it's a very interesting case that if your indentation depth is at a small value, you'll find that the real contact area is much larger than your ideal case. If this area cannot be predicted, cannot be obtained to be in the accuracy, you'll find that you have a high error when you operating in the at low small indentation depth. 我们就是说，我们常常在很低的这一个很小的这个压伸之下，我们得到的这一个真实的接触面积，往往会远比这个 ideal case 的大很多。So in that case, we use the AC to obtain our material hardness or a reduced module. In this case, the area, real contact area, at a small indentation depth, we have, in general, we have create a large error. 就是你在小压伸的时候，通常来讲，这一个我们的小压伸的时候产生的误差会比较大。Okay, so the big error, the larger error is always created at your indentation depth to be a small value. Okay, so this is we call the indented geometry. Okay, so if your thickness of your here is very interesting since it's that when you are thin film is TF thickness, and then here is your substrate. The indentation depth become very important to determine your thin film property. In general, we have our indentation depth always less than 20% of the T of F. Okay. Your T of F is the thin film thickness, and then you have your maximum indentation depth over less than 20% of your thin film thickness. Why you have this restriction? That's because if you have your HI larger than this ratio, then in this case, the subject behavior will have much influence on your measurement in the determination of the hardness and the Young's module. 就是说，你的深度越深的话，你的底材对这个你量测结果的这个硬度跟杨氏模式的影响会越大。Okay, so in general, in order to avoid the substrate effect on the material property of your thin film, in this case, we allow your indentation depth always that much is always less than 20% of your thin film thickness. Okay, so this is very, very important. So in this case, if you have a 10 nanometer thin film thickness, then give the 20% of your indentation depth. In this case, it's just so your maximum indentation depth, if your thin film thickness is just if your thin film thickness is just 10 nanometer, then give the 20% of the ratio, then obtain your maximum indentation depth is just 2 nanometer. If you operating at the 2 nanometer indentation depth, in this case, you have the risk of your area ratio for the actual and the ideal case. The ratio will become very large. It means that if you have the 2 nanometer indentation depth, you obtain your real contact area. It's not true. It's not true. Okay. It means that you obtain your hardness or your Young's module. Maybe wrong. Maybe wrong. Okay. So that is just we hope that we have our effect can be no substrate behavior. But when you operating at the small indentation depth, in that case, you will find that your real contact area obtained from your indentation tester, you'll find that it's a big error. 所以很薄的这个薄膜，你要得到很准的这个 real contact area， 往往是最困难的事情。Okay, so that is your indented geometric behavior with much influence on our real contact area evaluation. Okay. This is the fifth factor we call the indented tip geometry and the area function. Okay. For the ideal pyramid, it means that your tip is just the pyramid， 就是我们讲的这个金字塔形 or conical form. If it's a conical form, ideal Bukovic indenter, our real contact area, please give the A to be the AC. A change to be the AC. And then here, H is just HC. H change to be the HC. Okay? A is real contact area. H is just the real contact depth. Okay? So give it the subtract C over subscript over this A and H, right? For the ideal case, it means that your tip is just a cockroach indented tip. Okay, it means it's very sharp. Okay, with an angle. In this case, we obtain the real contact area. Just use this form. Use this form. Okay. But actually, your indented tip is not the ideal case, not the sharp one. It's with the front surface. Look like this one. This is the SEM image of an cockroach indenter. You'll find that the tip is just the rounding shape, or a round shape. Okay, it's not the sharp tip. Okay, so it is just the front of the tip area. Okay, it's no longer to be the sharp one. So in this case, our indented geometry will influence our behavior when your indentation depth is operating at a small value. Here, Oliver and Farr give the correction or mean the modification of your ideal case. Your ideal case just 24.5 hc squared. Here, we have the add additional term. Like the last time we mentioned that this additional add term is used to correct our ideal case because our indented tip no longer to be the cockroach indenter, no longer to be the ideal indenter. Okay? So in that case, we needed this additional term to modify our non-ideal case, right? So here they show the result of the two literature experiment data. This data showing here, the ordinate is the cross-section area, you mean the AC. This is the real contact area. And then the opposite is the indentation depth, right? Here, they have two set of the experiment data expressed in the dot and the triangle form, right? 我们有这个点的资料跟三角形的资料。These data are obtained from two experiments published in these two literature, right? Okay. Now, we have the solid curve. The solid curve is obtained from this equation. Okay? Alright? And then here we have the R. What is mean by R? R is just the radius of the indentation tip. Our indenter after the tip area is look like a sphere, like a sphere case. So in this case, after the tip, they have a radial curvature R to put the radius. The tip of the look like the round spherical form. So in this case, we can have the radial curvature after the tip to be the R, all right? So R, we try to give a different value. For example, from the 2,000, 1,000 to 500, low to the 100, okay? So they have a full curve. This is solid curve. Okay. We find our experiment data. They have a more or less difference from this four radial curvature. Okay. The radial curvature is you set the different value, you obtain the four solid value, solid curve. But the experiment data they are more or less different from this solid curve. Okay, and they have a dash curve. They have a dash curve. What does it mean by dash curve? This dash curve is ideal parameter. It means that we don't have any radial curvature. We have a curvature indented to be the ideal case. It means that your tip is sharp. In this case, is this dash curve. Okay. So from the comparison of your different radial curvature, you will find that they have a big difference depending on your radial curvature at the tip, right? When you operating at the small depths， 你作用在非常小的压伸的时候，你会发现这所有的情况，包括实验的结果跟这个理论分析的结果，得到的这个结果有很大的差别。So big difference always exists when you operating at the small indentation depths. But if you increase your indentation depth to be large value, like here, you will find that all of this curve are grouped into the one curve. 所有的这个曲线集中在一个线上。Okay, so all curve grouped to be a one curve. When you operate a small indentation depth, it means that at this area, you mean at the large indentation depth area. In this case, you don't care about the radial curvature of your tip. Okay, so in this case, when you in the future, when you have your indentation depth at a small value, you should be very careful because you use a different radial curvature at the same value, at the same operating condition, but you will find that your cross-section area are different value. That's because we have the cross-section area. You mean that the tip geometric effect on your real concave area function. Okay, so that is very important. It always exists in our indentation work. This is very frequently made in our indentation test. Okay, so when you give your indentation test to be a small value, in this case, you should be very careful. Okay, very cautious to your result to obtain your cross-section area. Your cross-section area at a small indentation depth maybe not exactly correct. Okay, because in here, in this region, at a small indentation depth, your tip geometric effect become very important. All right. So this we use the addition term to correct it. Even we have the correction term for here, but you will find that you still have a big difference, totally dependent on the radial curvature R in your application. Okay, so that is when you do the experiment, you have to take a notice of this one. Now, the fifth factor, we call the piling up and the sink in. Piling up and the sink in. Piling up 就是堆积 ，sink in 就凹下去。I have told you that piling up in general happen when you have your specimen to be the soft material, like the aluminum or copper or some rubber material. 你铜啊、铝的，还有这个塑胶的、橡胶的材料，这类材料 we have the piling up. What is piling up? Piling up means that it is unformed and deformed material. 你的材料还没做这个压痕实验。 This undeformed surface. Now you would apply the load, give the indentation test, and give the HIP. Alright? Then you'll find that your material, it looks like this one. They have some material piling up over the cavity. This is the cavity region. And then they have the cavity region, but you will find around the cavity region, they have a piling up. This is the piling up. 堆积. If you're grading to be the soft material, okay, we have a piling up. Okay, what is the sink in? Sink is more general because we always our test operating in the ceramic material. Okay, but sometimes you also how your test to be used in the soft material. Is a deformed surface. And then how we indentation depth? We call the HI. And then your material substrate, your sample, how the surface will look like this one. So this is we call the contact depth, HC. This schematic diagram we have talked about many times, right? So you'll find that here, your HI is larger than your HC. You mean that your contact depth is beneath the undeformed surface. 就在这个 undeformed surface 的下面 ，okay. So this HC value is more than your HI. But in this case, your HC is this value. Your HI is smaller than your HC. Okay. This we call the piling up. This we call the sinking in. Sinking in. Okay, all right. This sinking in case, in general, in the brittle material, or hard material. All right. So this we call the piling up or sinking in. All right. So the HC here, HP. Just HC. We have